So, in following along in the news and in conversations with our largest corporate partners, we noticed several things. Companies, especially major companies, many of them have pivoted slightly towards cultural orgs. We've seen this with the rise of corporate social responsibility, where you now have major brands like McDonald's, Walmart, Starbucks, all the big banks, doing entire ad campaigns not about their products or services, but about the positive impact they're having in the community. We've seen the growth of creative placemaking, where companies join together with government, nonprofits, and cultural organizations to build a community around cultural activities. We've seen the growth of design thinking, not only as a concept, but as an actual tool that major Fortune 500 companies are using to solve core business problems. And especially among millennials, we've seen a growth in community investment and volunteerism, and the idea that the places where they work should take care of them both professionally and personally, and that is key for acquiring and retaining folks in what is now the largest working generation in the country. These professionals want to see visible, tangible stories about how their company is making a positive impact in the community. And if you look at this list, I would argue that cultural institutions, museums is where I've done most of my work, are perfect places to be doing all of these things. These priorities have grown among companies, and yet what we've seen is that though companies have pivoted towards cultural institutions, museums and other cultural orgs haven't necessarily shifted back to meet these companies and as their priorities have shifted. There are a couple reasons for that, I think. The first goes back to the chart I showed a couple slides ago. Corporate fundraising, from a revenue standpoint, makes up a comparably small portion of overall fundraising. So accordingly, it hasn't received a lot of resources and institutional attention. I think the other bit has to do with fundraising departmental structures. And since I'm in a room of mostly development professionals, we can get in the weeds a bit with this. So what we found at the Barnes is that if we wanted to shift the way we approached a corporate relationship, that it really could no longer live in institutional giving, which for us was alongside foundation relations and government relations. And so what we did was we took corporate membership out of institutional giving and aligned it with our individual membership programs, our general membership program and our upper level giving program called the Circles at the Barnes. And what we gained when we did that was a few things. We made the relationship about individual engagement and reported and tracked on that engagement in the way we do with individuals. Individual relationship building at museums is about how many times did they visit, how many people did they bring them, what programs did they attend, what exhibitions did they come to, and what types of art are they interested in. If we apply that same framework to a corporate relationship at scale, so we're focused not on one or two executives, but on the entire company's worth of employees, we felt like we might have a better shot of gaining a sense of how we could serve massive amounts of people, move beyond a brand relationship. The executive relationship's always going to be key. I don't want to gloss over that. They are the primary decision makers. Often they are the primary funders. The relationship with marketing departments, with community relations departments is always going to be key. But we found that by realigning corporate membership with our individual membership programs, we were able to create internal value around the scale of that relationship, not just the level of that relationship. And the last committee that we created was a Young Professionals Leadership Board. And many of your organizations might have something like a Young Patrons Board or a Young Friends Committee, sort of on the individual giving side. This is definitely not that. This is a group of rising executives identified mostly by the senior executives on the Corporate Leadership Board in their 20s and 30s, whose sole mandate is not fundraising or member acquisition, but their only job is to increase employee engagement with the Barnes at their companies. And we thought we'd have a really tough time recruiting these people. Folks in their 20s and 30s are busy. They're going through a lot of life changes, and we thought they might not have time for something like this. But in recruiting them, we found that many of them actually sit on internal committees at their companies. They're plugged in across the company, and they feel like as part of their professional development, career growth, that it's worth it for them to be in touch and to have relationships across several different company functions in a much different way than an executive might. So these people are actually very plugged in, and their goal specifically on the YPLB is to drive visitation, increase awareness of our programs, especially among first-time visitors and young professionals, and to reorient their thinking of the Barnes not just as a place for leisure activities, but to promote it within the company as a place for creative placemaking, design thinking, problem solving, and fresh perspectives. And we've had a lot of success with that. We've found that the deeper we can create relationships across the company over time, there becomes value in a membership benefit kind of way for the company to feel like they're not only getting their name or their logo on the building or on our website, but they actually see us as partners for the work that they're doing in their company. I think cultural organizations, even just visually by their buildings, especially museums, highly visible partners for companies, maybe the most visible nonprofit partner that a company could have. And we need to leverage that. And we found that the deeper the relationship is across the company, the easier it is to do that. So really leveraging the value and expertise that cultural organizations have to help businesses solve core problems. This is not about leisure entertainment, although there's certainly a component of that. This is about cultural orgs using corporate membership to help companies solve key problems. The other initiative that I really think is applicable is our work with employee resource groups. If there's one thing you can go back and do easily next week, reach out to your primary contacts at all of your corporate partners and ask to speak with the leadership of their employee resource groups. Some companies have different names for them, but ERGs are a way for employees to come together under a shared identity. So for example, Comcast, biggest employer in Philadelphia, has 8 of them. They have one for young professionals, for women, African Americans, Hispanic, Asian Americans, LGBTQ, differently abled, veterans. And what you get when you meet with the leaders of these groups is insight into an entire cross-section of employees across all levels at a company coming together, and they have a mandate in these ERGs to work on new initiatives. They have their own communication structures. They have their own leadership structures. And at big companies, they have actual revenue and resources behind them to do these things. And in 18 months, I'll give you a few examples of outcomes from these conversations. Lastly, I'll just mention we have a Barrett Morisot retrospective coming in the fall, 19th century female French painter. And for that, we've been reaching out to all of the women's networks at all of our major corporate partners. Since I put the slide together 2 weeks ago, in addition to GlaxoSmithKline, we've had Bank of America, Janney Montgomery Scott, a financial firm in Philadelphia, and PECO, the power company, who just yesterday asked if they could hold a 300-person event around women's and gender equality and women's entrepreneurship at the Barnes around this show. And the corporate partnership enabled us to do that. New audiences, new members, and helping them solve a key business problem of making their work more visible in the community. And that's a great testament, obviously, for us, but the idea that you can create fresh perspectives, unique opportunities, I think is something not only to be understood at the executive level, but across companies. We really are places where businesses can be solving core business problems. I think corporate membership is the fundamental structure around which we can do it. And I urge you all to think about how you can leverage that, not only to increase your fundraising bottom lines, but to increase audiences, new individual members, and to help expand what your mission can do for the greater community.